A platform that will channel support to the reforms and priorities that will make imagination reality. Together we gather here to tell Ukrainians that their dream is also our dream. In January, we all created the so-called multi-agency donor coordination platform. It is a first of its kind in the history of international aid. It brings together Ukraine, the G7, the European Union, the European Investment Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the IMF, and the World Bank. It creates a single focal point for international donors to guarantee that support goes exactly where Ukraine needs it most. The European Commission is contributing 18 billion euros already this year, and together with other donors, we closed Ukrainians' budget gap for 2023, so that Ukraine can continue to pay salaries, pensions, and, for example, for their health care. This is for Ukraine's immediate needs. But let's talk about the future. I believe the European Union has a special responsibility. And the reason is simple. We heard the President. Ukrainians tell us that when they imagine their future, they see Europe's flag flying over their cities. And I have no doubt that Ukraine will be part of our union. So today, I want to announce two new steps. The first is about Ukraine's reforms and its path towards EU membership. Despite the war, Ukraine has accelerated its reform agenda with impressive speed and resolve. We in the European Union want to match efforts and dedication. And this is why today the European Commission presents a new oral update on the progress Ukraine made, on judicial reform, on anti-corruption, on new laws for media freedom and international minorities, for example. With these reforms, Ukraine also sends a powerful message to private investors. They will get the transparency, the fairness, and the functioning institutions they need to invest in Ukraine. And this is especially important because we need the private sector to step into. Because it is you, the private sector, with your invaluable expertise and your financial firepower that will help Ukraine realize its dreams. You're here today at this conference, and we really need you, and we know we can rely on you. And that brings me to my last point. We want to match Ukrainian reforms with European investments. For every step Ukraine takes towards us, the European Union must take a step towards Ukraine. Yesterday, the European Commission proposed to create a new facility for Ukraine within the budget of the European Union. It will ensure constant financial support till 2027. The facility will be financed in three ways: with grants from the European budget, with loans raised on capital markets, and eventually with proceeds from the immobilized Russian assets. We will come with a proposal for these assets before the summer break, because the perpetrator has to be held accountable. Now, what are the estimated needs? Until 2027, Ukraine's remaining fiscal gap is about 60 billion euros. The needs for fast recovery on top are about 50 billion euros. That makes in total 110 billion euros until 2027 that are not covered. Therefore, yesterday I proposed to EU member states to cover 45% of this gap. This is in total 50 billion euros for Ukraine. And we will work with Ukraine on a corresponding plan, and we heard the first outlines of the plan, and more details will come today, for investments and reform. This plan could become an anchor for all international donors, including the private sector. You need predictability, you need clarity, you need transparency. This will help our coordination and will maximize our impact. And this is what I mean when we say we are with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Ladies and gentlemen, Putin shattered peace on our continent on February 24th in 2022. But he triggered also Ukraine's journey towards its dream. And it's our job and our duty to the Ukrainians who've paid the ultimate sacrifice, that we ensure that this reimagined future becomes reality, brick by brick, house by house, school by school. Together we are by Ukraine's side for the long haul. Slava Ukraini.
Well, hello, everybody. As you all know, nearly 16 months ago, Russian troops launched a brutal invasion that has brought terror, bloodshed, and anguish to Ukraine and to its people. Russia's actions are not only a vicious assault on a sovereign nation determined to choose its own path, they're also an attack on the international, rule-based order that has underpinned so much of humanity's progress since the end of the Second World War. Early on, I lent my voice to Ukraine's fight for sovereignty and self-determination. I've done this because their struggle is ours too. The alternative to a free and democratic Ukraine is an increasingly illiberal and insular world. A world without justice, a world without equality or the rule of law. A world devoid of human decency and humanity. I'm sure you agree that it's the very antithesis to a world any of us would want to live in. In the last 12 months, I've had the privilege of visiting Ukraine twice, meeting not only President Zelensky, but also countless brave Ukrainians. Many shared harrowing and moving stories of devastation, suffering, and loss. And yet, I've also learned so much about Ukrainians' courage and resilience, and the unbreakable spirit at the heart of their fight for survival. I have more hope than ever that this fight can and will be won. We'll have to see what the coming weeks and months hold, but the continued support of Ukraine's allies has been making a difference, and I hope this support will remain unwavering until the last Russian troops leave Ukraine's sovereign territory, from Donbass to Crimea. Today, I thank all of you who have come to London to discuss what Ukraine's recovery might look like. But more importantly, 44 million Ukrainians, a quarter of them now refugees or internally displaced, look to this conference in anticipation. Their hopes and aspirations are really not different from those most of us hold dear: to live in peace and free from repression, to see their families, friends, and communities flourish, to find opportunity, perhaps even to start a business. That's the humanity behind every figure and every statistic. And we must never forget that this is why we are here. Business will be central to this effort. To begin, we must continue to speak up for Ukraine and against the aggressor. I'm encouraged that so many business leaders have stepped forward and done that. I felt deeply honored when President Zelensky asked me to serve as an ambassador to his initiative, United 24, and will do what I can to be a voice for Ukraine and its amazing people. Sadly, there is an unacceptably large number of businesses that continue to do business in and with Russia, contributing significantly to Putin's war chest. Sanctions must be tightened, loopholes closed, and violations punished. I really hope that governments will find answers to these challenges. There will be no recovery without peace, and for Ukraine to win the peace, business must not stand in its way. Many of us supporting Ukraine welcome the UK government's initiative to launch a business compact for Ukraine, and I'm proud that the Virgin Group is among the first companies to sign on. Ukraine needs a sustained collective commitment across all sectors to help rebuild its infrastructure and its battered towns, and to bring its economy back on its feet. The World Bank estimates that Ukraine's recovery will require at least 400 billion over the next 10 years. Some may call this the cost of fixing things. I'd like to think of it as a smart investment in Ukraine's future that will power innovation and green growth, led by the skill, talent, and determination of Ukraine's entrepreneurial people. Many of us stand ready to do our part, and I urge you all to do yours and create an enabling environment so that Ukraine can build back better. A thriving, prosperous Ukraine is our best hope for peace and stability in the region and beyond. Your support and your commitments will make all the difference. In this spirit, I wish all of you a most productive conference. Cheers. Thank you.
I think if he did raise a glass of whiskey, it would be even a stronger message. But Richard is a good friend of Ukraine. He has been to Kyiv many times. As our brave soldiers are on the counteroffensive against Russian army in Ukraine, we are launching a counteroffensive against destruction caused by the Russian army in Ukraine. And I would like to thank all of you for gathering here. We are not starting from scratch. As President Zelensky said, time has come to move from visions to agreements. And this is why we attach great importance specifically to this event in London. And as we are about to begin the part of the conference led by my colleagues and friends, foreign ministers, I would like to thank all of them personally and their governments they represent for their leadership, commitment, and true friendship in helping Ukraine mitigate the consequences of the disaster caused by the Russian aggression and damage inflicted, not only on us, but on Europe as a whole and Euro-Atlantic space as a whole. Thank you, and we are looking forward to very productive discussions here in London.
Thanks to my good friend Dmytro. And now could I invite my fellow foreign ministers to the stage, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, Ala Karis, the President of Estonia, Krišjānis Kariņš, the Prime Minister of Latvia, Antonio Tajani, Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister of Italy, Annalena Baerbock, Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, Yoshimasa Hayashi, the Foreign Minister of Japan, Catherine Colonna, Foreign Minister of France, Zbigniew Rau, Foreign Minister of Poland, and Harjit Sajjan, Minister for International Development of Canada. And can I invite first to speak Antony Blinken, US Secretary of State. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Prime Minister Sunak, Prime Minister Schmel, thank you for bringing us together and bringing together such a broad and diverse coalition of governments, businesses, international financial institutions, civil society groups, all dedicated to Ukraine's recovery. As President Biden has said since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the United States will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. And that includes being by Ukraine's side as it recovers from this catastrophic Russian aggression. It's easy sometimes to be a little numbed by what is going on day in, day out in Ukraine. We see the images flash by on our TV screens. We talk about the numbers. And sometimes what gets lost is the day in, day out human devastation that Russia is inflicting on Ukraine. And I think it's so important that even as we gather here today to talk in detail about what all of us are doing together with Ukraine to help it recover, we never lose sight of that human dimension, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Back in April, just one day in this devastating aggression, in the city of Uman, hundreds of miles from the front lines, another assault of Russian missiles on innocent Ukrainian civilians, on apartment buildings, hundreds of miles away. In one of those buildings, before dawn, a Russian missile struck. The father, Dmytro, in his apartment, raced to his children's room. He opened the door to the room to try to see how his children, Kirilo, 17, and Sofia, 11, were doing. He opened the door to the room. It wasn't there anymore. His children were gone. 2 of the 6 children killed that one day in April, as a result of this ongoing aggression against Ukraine. 2 of thousands killed through the course of this war. 2 lives interrupted. 2 stories stopped. Every day killed through the course of this war. 2 lives interrupted. 2 stories stopped. Every day. But as Russia continues to destroy, we are here to help Ukraine rebuild. Rebuild lives, rebuild its country, rebuild its future. Recovery is about more than just ensuring people have what they need to survive: food to eat, water to drink, medicine to take, heat in the winter, electricity in all seasons. Recovery is about laying the foundation for Ukraine to thrive as a secure, independent country, fully integrated with Europe, connected to markets around the world. A democracy rooted in the rule of law, a place where all Ukrainians have dignity, human rights, the opportunity to reach their full potential. Every investment that we make in Ukraine's recovery is aimed at bringing Ukrainians closer to that reality. And today, I'm announcing that with the support of the United States Congress, we will provide more than $1.3 billion in additional aid to help Ukraine toward that goal. We're going to invest over $520 million to help Ukraine overhaul its energy grid, more than half of which, as you've heard, has been destroyed by Russia. And in so doing, make it cleaner, make it more resilient, make it more integrated with Europe. And we'll support Ukraine's energy market reforms to combat monopolies and to spur more private investment, which will enable Ukraine one day to become a major energy exporter. This support will complement the work that's already being done by the G7 Plus Coordination Group, which we launched last October and have co-led ever since, first with Germany, now with Japan. That group has grown to include 18 countries and several multilateral institutions. Together, we've allocated billions of dollars to help repair and rebuild Ukraine's energy sector. We've sent more than 5 million power generators to Ukraine, transformers, cables, pipes, circuit breakers, other pieces of energy equipment. The United States will also provide $657 million to help modernize Ukraine's border crossings, its rail lines, its ports, other critical infrastructure that connect the country with Europe. allowing it to exchange more goods by more pathways, more and more efficiently. We'll direct an additional $100 million toward digitizing Ukraine's customs and other systems to boost speed and to cut corruption. And we'll commit $35 million to help Ukrainian businesses and entrepreneurs through financing and insurance that reduces risks for investors in Ukraine. This new support that I'm announcing today comes on top of more than $20 billion that the United States has provided in economic and development assistance to Ukraine's workers, its businesses, its public services, to help them endure the 16 months of punishing conflict with unwavering bipartisan support from our Congress. Across this support, we're striving to build a Ukraine that's inclusive, that's accessible, so that people with disabilities can reach their full potential, which is in the interest of all Ukrainians. My announcement today also comes on top of the more than $2.1 billion in humanitarian assistance that we provided to Ukraine and to the region to respond to Russia's war of aggression, including life-saving aid for those affected by the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam. Within hours of its breach, we mobilized support for evacuations, for emergency deliveries of food, of safe drinking water, of fuel, of medical aid. In the weeks since, we've continued to work with Ukraine in assisting the thousands of people who've been displaced, the hundreds of thousands whose water supply has been contaminated. And these are just the immediate consequences of the catastrophe that will probably wreak environmental and economic devastation for many months and indeed many years to come. Meanwhile, the United Nations has publicly called out Moscow for blocking the UN from delivering aid to civilians in the flooded areas that Russia illegally occupies, adding to Russia's long track record of denying humanitarian access, which is a requirement under international humanitarian law. In addition to our economic development and humanitarian assistance, the United States will continue to invest in Ukraine's long-term efforts to strengthen good governance, transparency, accountability. We'll bolster its justice sector and anti-corruption institutions, strengthen its civil society and its free press. These institutions and organizations empower Ukrainians to hold their government accountable, to check the power of vested interests, and they're crucial to ensuring that the unprecedented resources that all of us are providing are managed responsibly. The Ukrainian government has made meaningful strides in bolstering these institutions, even as it fights for survival. And Kyiv has taken tangible and difficult steps to align its standards and practices with the European Union, particularly since the EU granted Ukraine candidate status a year ago. Earlier this month, Ukraine passed reforms to align its energy market regulations with the European Union, strengthening measures to combat market manipulation and insider trading. And we look forward to the Rada taking up anti-monopoly legislation very soon. Adopting these and other critical reforms to increase Ukraine's transparency and competitiveness, to bolster the rule of law, will help attract more private investment. And that is essential, and you heard it from my colleagues. Governments are doing a lot. International financial institutions are doing a lot. Both of us have a hugely important role to play in Ukraine's recovery. But it is not enough. Only the private sector can mobilize the level of investment necessary to meet the country's massive needs. The diverse participation of the private sector here today in this conference shows the growth opportunity that global firms and investors see in the future of Ukraine, in the future of its people. But make no mistake, all of these reforms and recovery efforts depend on Ukraine having the capacity to deter and defend against future attacks by Russia. That's why, even as we invest in Ukraine's immediate and long-term recovery, we also have to build a Ukrainian military that is strong enough to protect Ukraine's sovereignty, its territorial integrity, and its independence. Not just to defend Ukraine's land, but to defend all that Ukrainians are building and will build on that land. It's also why the United States is committed to working to build support for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, the core elements of which I outlined a couple of weeks ago in Helsinki. Those include a peace that upholds the United Nations Charter and its fundamental principles, sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence, that addresses both accountability and reconciliation, that ensures Ukraine's full participation and assent, and that supports Ukraine's reconstruction and recovery. Even as we rally around Ukraine's recovery, we must not lose sight of why that is necessary in the first place. Indeed, even as we come together here in London, committed to supporting Ukraine's build-up, Russia continues to try to burn it down. So, let's be clear. Russia is causing Ukraine's destruction, and Russia will eventually bear the cost of Ukraine's reconstruction. Until that time, we will continue to stand with the people of Ukraine as they make the greatest sacrifices to defend, to rebuild, to reimagine their country. And in doing so, we will reaffirm the principle at the heart of the international order, that people in every nation can write their own future, free from aggression, free from coercion, free from intimidation. That is a recovery well worth our robust and enduring support. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alar Karis, the President of Estonia. Thank you.
Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Our response to Russian aggressive destruction will be creation. We will help to rebuild and create a new, innovative, sustainable and digital Ukraine. We will not wait until the war is over. In fact, we already started. I am pleased to note that on the 2nd of June, the first Estonian reconstruction project was completed, a kindergarten in the city of Ovruch in Žitomer Oblast. This perfect example of public-private partnership brought happiness to many kids and their parents, but also to us. It is gratifying feeling to do the good deeds. As we continue with other projects, let's show that reconstruction is not only needed, but as we saw in Ovruch, it is already possible. I urge everyone to start now with smart efforts and not restore the old, but build future-proof Ukraine that can inspire us all. Estonia has worked with Ukraine for years to support public sector reforms and help increase its resilience. We redoubled our efforts in 2014 when Russian aggression started, and again before the start of a large-scale war in 2022. Estonian private sector has been instrumental in our cooperation, be it developing Trembita, the backbone of the digital government of Ukraine, that has helped the country continue offering public services even during the war. Or the latest example, the kindergarten. It was realized by the Estonian Wooden House cluster and its member Hermet, together with Eurocon, the Ukrainian subsidiary of the main contractor Nordecon. Estonian construction companies have a high motivation to offer European construction standards and reliable partnership in the next stage of the reconstruction of Ukraine. I recently returned from a visit to Ukraine with a business delegation and witnessed a great interest to work with and invest in Ukraine. Estonia has reacted fast to all critical needs of the Ukrainian people. It includes cash-based support, generators, buses, and equipment of humanitarian demining. The recent example is sending necessary equipment, rubber boots, water pumps, etc., to the region after the explosion of Kakhovka Dam, another disastrous exercise caused by Russian invasion. Ukraine has the potential to become one of the most successful economies in Europe. I saw this in my recent visit to Ukraine while meeting with students, scientists, officials from anti-corruption agency. There is enormous enthusiasm and willingness to bring on the long-awaited change. It is important to provide a comprehensive policy framework as well as funding support for skilled and educated Ukrainians, which will allow them to return to Ukraine one day. For this, investment and attention to recovery are needed. It will also support Ukraine on its way to joining EU and NATO. Membership of these organizations is essential to achieve our common goal of creating a peaceful Europe and protecting the sustainability of our investments. The scale of the challenge at hand is almost unimaginable. We need a common approach to make the best use of our resources. This can be done by involving all partners, big and small, public and private, and leveraging the long-term experience from the region. Ladies and gentlemen, our companies continue to operate in Ukraine. Some never stopped the production and kept all personnel employed. Like PRT Group, which is currently investing into a new strategic project to ensure the stability of supply of vital gases in Ukraine. I would also like to mention Nortal, the Estonian company bought Ukrainian IT company Scalia just a few months after the war started and employs today 350 Ukrainian employees in its offices in Kiev and Lviv. According to Nortal, the decision was made in Ukraine's favor because of a qualified workforce and high level of digitalization. Ukrainian IT sector has shown great growth even during the war. In the defense industry, the third system and Millennium Robotics have done successful cooperation and are supplying high-level drones and unmanned ground vehicles configured to transport the wounded and equipment. We stand ready to share our experience and help in any way we can. And we remain committed to our proposal to organize Ukraine Reconstruction Conference. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, can I ask Krišjānis Kariņš, the Prime Minister of Latvia, to the stage? Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, friends, I'll just try to say a few words. So many good speeches, I can only agree with everything. Flashback to the fall and winter of 21-22. The Latvian government starts getting briefings from the US government. Every morning I'm reading about new troop movements. Every week in the government meeting, now we're meeting in the special room that is good for such meetings, and we're trying to understand what exactly is going on, what could we expect. Now, Latvia has a history with Russia where we never had any illusions that things are going very well to our east. And we had every indication that things are actually going in an absolutely bad direction. So we took a decision at the late fall, early November, December, that we wanted to send weapons to Ukraine. It doesn't look good. It looks like a war really could erupt. We have had now Stinger missiles in our arsenal. Well, you don't just send these things around. you coordinate with the US government. It took a little while. Our Stingers arrived in Ukraine just one day before the full-scale invasion, and thankfully, they were part of the solution of keeping the Russians from taking the airport, which is part of their initial plan. Since that time, our government has spent over 1.3% of our GDP on all kinds of aid to Ukraine. Over 1% is military alone. So our Stinger missiles, all of our Stinger missiles are now in Ukraine. We had a fleet of helicopters. All of those helicopters, the last ones, are still being repainted. We send them so that they're usable and look good as well, are going to Ukraine. We are training Ukrainian soldiers to the order of about 3,000 this year. Ammunition, drones, etc., is continually going and will continue to go in this way. On top of that, humanitarian aid, on top of that, financial aid. And on top of all of this, our civil society has been going head-to-head with the government who can donate more faster and more efficiently. So after the Kakhovka Dam was exploded, within 1 week we took 3 different government decisions on different aid packages coordinated with the Ukrainians. But at the same time, our civil society spontaneously, it's very well organized in Latvia, organizing all kinds of shipments of generators, boats, everything that is needed in flood-devastated areas to get them there, and they're already on the ground and working today. So as a nation, we understand the Ukrainians because what are they fighting for? They're fighting for, well, many things, but you could boil it down to 3 values. Freedom, it's been mentioned. Democracy, it's been mentioned. And the rule of law. Now, all of us, we talk about these things all the time. We're all freedom fighters. But friends, the Ukrainians are freedom fighters. We are now freedom supporters. And what we need to do is to persevere. And my message to you is simple. A small country like Latvia, if we can spend 1.3% of our GDP, so can you. We're not the wealthiest of nations, but it can be done. And as a politician, I can say, actually, it's good for politics as well. So the more you give aid, the higher your ratings go. I can assure that to everyone around the room. Now, we're speaking about reconstruction today. Latvia is committed to the Chernihiv region. This is also in working together with the Ukrainian government. Very specific needs, very specific projects that we're working on. And what we're also seeing in Latvia, interestingly, that business trade between Latvia and Ukraine is up over 60% this year. In the middle of a war, 60% increase. And why is that? It's because on top of all of the aid, more and more companies are realizing they have an important role to play. Not only in donating, but in helping to create. So also today there are companies from the energy sector, from the language technology sector, from other sectors in Latvia present here today, looking for these opportunities. And if we can mobilize not only public funds, but the private funds, that is one incredible opportunity for everyone, for the Ukrainians, but for all of Europe. Now, and what is the sort of the end game, the outcome? How will it all end? Well, there are a number of steps. So first and basic, Ukraine will win the war, and Ukrainian territory will be liberated of the Russian aggressor everywhere. That is point one. That needs our continued, especially military support. Step two, we have to help Ukraine in the integration process. Ursula, I don't see her right now, Ursula von der Leyen said very correctly, Ukraine's place will be in the European Union, no doubt about that, and we will become stronger because of your joining us. But I think it's also important to state that at the end of the day, if we want a long-standing peace in Europe, the only way to really assure that is Ukraine's also full integration into the NATO military alliance. Another important aspect, it has been mentioned, it needs to be stressed, that the perpetrator must pay. The Russians are destroying Ukraine. We have frozen billions, probably trillions of their assets. A way must be found to mobilize these assets to help offset the cost of the reconstruction. And finally, the Russian leadership must be held accountable, ultimately, in a tribunal for all of the atrocities and the crimes against humanity that they are perpetrating, even as we speak. So, united, we will stand with and behind Ukraine, and in the end, we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!
Ladies and gentlemen, please can I invite Antonio Tajani, Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister of Italy. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, dear colleagues, let me thank you very much for organizing and hosting this very important event. The Ukraine Recovery Conference is, first of all, a political meeting, because today we are sending a very clear political message to everybody, first of all to Russia. We are united, Europeans, Americans, many countries, many governments, many states, many entrepreneurs, public and private sector, united in defense of the international law. This is the clear and important message for today. We are in defense of the rules, not only in defense of the independence of Ukraine, because the independence of Ukraine is freedom, is peace, is justice, is international law. For this we are strongly engaged today. And of course, it's impossible to achieve peace without justice. We want peace, but peace without justice is not peace. Justice is the freedom of Ukraine. And if you want to pave the way for a better future for your country, Mr. Prime Minister, if we want to pave the way for a full membership of Ukraine in the European Union, if we want to pave the way for your full membership in the NATO in the next 2 years, we need to work for the reconstruction. We need to work all together. My country, my government, the Italian government is strongly engaged in this strategy. We want to be protagonists for helping you, in defense of the freedom, because your freedom is our freedom. As you know, dear Prime Minister, just a few weeks ago, we were with you, with your government, in Rome, in the presence, more or less, 1,000 Italian and Ukrainian companies to discuss the reconstruction of your country. For Italy, the bilateral reconstruction conference in Rome was the start of the process in which Italy, together with the European Union and the international community, is committed to providing Ukraine with a strong military, humanitarian, financial, and economic assistance. Italy will keep playing a central role with the G7 presidency next year, and then by hosting this Ukraine Recovery Conference in 2025. To start rebuilding Ukraine, we don't have to wait for the end of the conflict, as often reminded by the President Zelensky. There are many things that we can do together. First of all, the Russian attempt to exploit the winter to bring the civilian population to its knees. We must work now to restore what has been destroyed by the end of the summer, starting with the energy infrastructure, of which Italy is committed with public funds and its national companies. Secondly, we can immediately remove the mines, as in the film, and rebuild bridges, roads, houses, schools, and hospitals. This is crucial for a better life of the Ukrainians. Italy is committed to bridging the resource gap for early recovery highlighted by the World Bank's assessment last March. Resources announced by the Conference of the Reconstruction in Rome amounting to 200 million euro will be used in this direction, in particular to support energy security and critical infrastructures. Our know-how is ready for you, is ready for Ukraine. Italy is an industrial country. 4,000 small and medium-sized companies. This is the heart of our economy. Our know-how is very important. The made in Italy is very important, and we want to export to Ukraine our made in Italy. It's important to work in the respect of the rules of the multilateral development banks, but this is crucial to do it. For the reconstruction to be successful, the contribution of the private investment is very important. We need your help. We need your involvement in this political strategy. The freedom, the free market is crucial for growth, is crucial for everybody, is crucial for our companies. Ukraine will be part of our internal market, of the European internal market. And to be present now is also to be present in the future, to be friends as Europeans, all together. And we want Ukraine full members, as I said, of the European Union, but also the Western Balkans countries candidate. We want to work all together. Of course, Ukraine is a country equipped with resources, space, and talent, and offers great investment opportunity. This is the message we must convey to the business world. In this spirit, dear Prime Minister, I have appointed a new special envoy, the last ambassador to Kiev, that will be the Italian focal point for the reconstruction process. This is a clear message. We are strongly engaged. We want to work more. We want to work with our friends. We want our companies are ready to invest in Ukraine. It is also essential that the reform path undertaken by the country continues in the future. The reconstruction process is indeed closely linked to the accession process to the European Union, as I said. Italy has immediately supported Kyiv European aspiration and will continue to work in this direction when we will decide to start the negotiation later this year. Only Ukraine integration in the European project can guarantee to our continent a future of peace, stability, and prosperity, and is therefore a strategic investment. For this, I said, this is today We are part of the political conference. For me, this is very, very important. They are friends. They are Ukrainian friends. They are friends of G7, the European friends, the American friends. Count on Italy. Count on Italian government. Prime Minister, we are close to you in defense of freedom, democracy, peace, international law. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Antonio. And can I now invite Annalena Baerbock, German Federal Minister for Foreign Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary. Thank you, James. Prime Ministers, Presidents, Excellencies, Prime Minister Šimak, ladies and gentlemen. The only thing I wish for is to go back to school, play volleyball with my friends, and live a normal life. This is what a teenager, 16 years old, said to me when I met her in Kharkiv in January, at a warming center, in the midst of a city destroyed by Russian bombs at minus 15 degrees. She told me how counting to 45 had become part of her daily life since the start of the Russian war of aggression. Because it takes 45 seconds for Russian missiles to hit Kharkiv after you hear the sirens. 45 seconds, if you're lucky, is enough to get your little brother or your grandmother to safety. But 45 seconds, that is not enough for a normal life. 45 seconds is not enough to go to school. 45 seconds is not enough to play volleyball. I believe that today's conference is about these teenagers in Kharkiv, the boys and girls and their generation. It is about supporting Ukraine to build a future in which all of Ukrainians will again live in freedom, security, and peace. From the moment Russia began its ruthless war of aggression on the 24th of February last year, all of us in this room have stood resolutely by the side of Ukraine, by the Ukrainians' right to defend themselves. This commitment does not stop here. For the German government, like all the other governments, this commitment stands for as long as it takes. We counter altogether Putin's destructive war of aggression with a rebuilding campaign, united in defense, united in rebuilding. We continue to support Ukraine financially, politically, with weapons. We want Ukraine to win this war, to win peace. That is why we have made clear that Ukraine belongs also to the European family. And the Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen said this morning that the European Commission on Ukraine's reform effort shows that Ukraine is making commendable progress despite the war. And Ukraine will eventually become a member of the European Union. With our partners, we are also working towards greater political and practical cooperation between Ukraine and NATO. And my colleague Minister for Development, Svenja Schulze, and I have come today here to underline that the German government is stepping up efforts for Ukraine's recovery. This recovery starts with humanitarian support. Germany will provide Ukraine with an additional €381 million for humanitarian assistance in 2023, for everything from generators to food and tents for those who have fled or lost their homes recently. We will continue our demining work, since there can be no peace in places where people live in constant fear of their children stepping on a mine while playing. This support comes on top to the total recovery assistance by the Foreign Office, the Ministry of Development, the Ministry of Economy, and many others in the German government. Because, yes, recovery is about money. It needs to be. Since the beginning of Russia's war, Germany has provided 16.8 billion euro in support relating to Russia's aggression against Ukraine, including military aid, and we applaud those countries connected to the GDP have done similar. But when we look at long-term reconstruction, money is not enough. We want to support Ukraine in building back better, as we called it last year's recovery conference in Lugano, Italy. This means that in rebuilding its power sector, we are helping Ukraine to invest in renewable energy and energy efficiency, in a recovery that is green and therefore longer lasting and sustainable. And reconstruction is a collective effort that will only succeed if public and private sectors work together, as you, James, have said so many times. Despite the war and its damage to Ukraine's economy, many German companies continue to operate in Ukraine, in healthcare, in energy, in food, in water. And they see reconstruction as others as an opportunity of growth. I applaud them for this. They not only provide goods, services, and jobs, they provide trust in the future of Ukraine. As German government, we therefore supporting them with national investment guarantees, because yes, this is also political. And we call on others to follow suit so that companies do not shy away from investing in Ukraine. Finally, I'm convinced that we need to further link Ukraine's recovery and the EU accession process. Our goal is to help rebuild a Ukraine that is fit for EU. We stand ready to support Ukraine in its reform efforts on the path towards membership. That's why Ukraine's accession process will have a special place at next year's recovery conference to be held in Germany, to make recovery a truly European endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, we do not know when Russia will stop its brutal war of aggression. It's in the hand of one man who has started this war. But what we know and what we promise, we will continue supporting Ukraine's recovery, and we will continue helping Ukraine to win this war, to win peace, so that every teenage girl in Ukraine can do what teenage girls are doing in the rest of Europe every day. Go to school without fear. Play volleyball with their friends without counting to 45. Simply live a normal life in peace and freedom. Thank you.
And now can I invite Yoshimasa Hayashi, Foreign Minister of Japan.
Thank you, James, and Prime Ministers, Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Hayashi Yoshimasa, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan. I would like to express my respect for the efforts made by the governments of the UK and Ukraine, and with those involved in organizing this conference. I particularly commend the UK's leadership in organizing this conference. First of all, I would like to reiterate our sympathy and solidarity with the people of Ukraine, especially following the recent dam collapse at Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant, and express my strong concern about its enormous impact. Japan decided to provide $5 million in emergency humanitarian assistance to those affected by the floods in such areas as food, water, sanitation, and health. And in addition, we will provide approximately 160 water purifiers, about 530 generators, 30 construction machines, and other equipment through Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, and an international organization. We will also implement emergency humanitarian assistance through NGOs. Japan, the only country that has ever suffered atomic bombings during wartime, has achieved a miraculous development from the devastation after the war. We have also experienced a series of serious natural disasters, including the Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake in 1995 and the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011 with tsunami. Each time, however, we have achieved remarkable recovery and reconstruction with the support of our friends in the international community. Japan, therefore, has experience and knowledge of recovery and reconstruction gained through overcoming such difficulties. During the visit to Japan for the G7 Hiroshima summit, President Zelensky stated that he dreams that city destroyed by Russia will be rebuilt into a peaceful city like Hiroshima of today. Japan intends to make use of its experience and knowledge it has accumulated in the field of recovery and reconstruction, and to vigorously implement uniquely Japanese form of reconstruction assistance in close contact with the Ukrainian people. At the G7 Hiroshima summit, the leaders confirmed the importance of the role of the private sector in the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine, which is one of the main subjects of this conference. As the G7, we issued a joint statement and in which we welcomed the establishment of the Support for Ukraine's Reconstruction and Economy SURE Trust Fund in the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA, as well as the launch of the Ukraine Investment Platform led by Japan's JBIC. Japan contributed $23 million to the SURE Trust Fund of the MIGA. As for the Ukrainian Investment Platform, we welcome that signing ceremony for its launch is taking place later today. And I'm convinced that based on the outcomes of the G7 Hiroshima summit, meaningful discussions will be made at this conference under the leadership of the UK on necessary measures to promote the involvement of the private sector, including war risk insurance, with a view to stimulating the insurance market and implementation of reforms in Ukraine. In order to gain further involvement of the private sector, Japan has recently established the Council on Preparation for Promotion of Ukraine's Economic Reconstruction with the participation of all the relevant ministries and agencies. Furthermore, the Japan-Ukraine Conference for Promotion of Economic Reconstruction will be held at an appropriate timing from the end of this year to the beginning of next year. so that the Japanese public and private sectors can strongly support the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. Japan has so far announced over $7.6 billion in support, including humanitarian assistance and winterization assistance to vulnerable people. In the medium and long-term recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine, Japan will make use of its strengths and provide assistance mainly in the areas of, number one, mine action and debris clearance, number two, in livelihood reconstruction, including the development of basic infrastructure such as electricity, number three, the recovery of agricultural production and industrial development, and number four, strengthening democracy and governance. Concrete initiatives are already underway. For example, with regard to mine action, in January this year, Japan conducted training for the personnel of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine to use mine detection equipment, which Japan is providing in cooperation with Cambodia, where Japan has long supported mine action. Japan also organized seminars on awareness-raising activities for local communities regarding mine risks. We will continue to provide mine-related assistance. In order to give the Ukrainian people hope for a bright future, it is essential not only that the international community shows the strong commitment to the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine, but also that efforts to restore peace to the country should be made. At the G7 Hiroshima summit, the leaders reaffirmed that the G7 is more united than ever in strong support for Ukraine in every aspect and in continuing to impose strict sanctions against Russia. It was also confirmed with invited countries outside the G7 that any unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force is unacceptable anywhere in the world, and upholding the free and open international order based on the rule of law is really essential. We will continue to work closely in cooperation with the international community to achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine as soon as possible. I wish that this recovery conference will be held successfully and that its outcomes will be milestones in the future reconstruction of Ukraine. Japan always stands with Ukraine. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Please now can I invite Catherine Colonna, Foreign Minister of the Republic of France.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary, dear James, Heads of State and Heads of Governments, Prime Minister of Ukraine, dear Denis, good to see you here. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, dear friends, I see a few in the room. I want to start by thanking the Government of the United Kingdom for hosting us today. Our gathering today is a symbol of our shared conviction that Ukraine will defeat the Russian aggression. There will be a time when the war ends and Ukraine will be standing as a strong, sovereign, united and democratic country, resolutely anchored in the Euro-Atlantic family and in Europe. And when I say in Europe, I mean in the European Union. This time hasn't come yet. We know that war is raging. Russia's authorities are still denying Ukraine its right to exist as a sovereign country.
Russia's soldiers are still illegally occupying parts of Ukraine's territory. Russia's missiles are still targeting the Ukrainian population and critical civilian infrastructures, which is, by international law, a war crime. Our main focus, therefore, remains on emergency-driven support. It is the case for military support, and we've been making our best efforts, all of us, to provide Ukraine with the equipment it needs and in time in order to support an ongoing counteroffensive. France delivered what it said it would deliver, and it would keep doing it. It is also the case with the humanitarian and civilian support we provide, be it to respond to disasters caused by Russia's aggression, such as the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, to increase Ukraine's resilience, or to preserve the safety of Ukraine's civilian nuclear power plants. This is the logic that drove the international conference we organized in Paris on December 30th last year, and I'd like to thank all those who did participate. But focusing on the emergency imposed by the ongoing war should not stop us from thinking long-term, for at least two reasons. One, Ukraine is engaged in a long-term transformation effort through its EU accession process. We need to use the reconstruction phase to give Ukraine a head start in this process. Two, our commitment to support Ukraine's reconstruction is also a signal we send to Putin, a signal that tells we'll be here as long as it takes, and that he will not be able to wait us out. A signal that should convince Russia it is in a deadlock and has to end its aggression now. In order to achieve this goal, France is preparing a multi-year civilian assistance package to Ukraine that will include both humanitarian, stabilization, economic and financial support. I am pleased to add that it will mostly be comprised in grants so as to avoid increasing the pressure on Ukraine's public finances. In the meantime, I'm happy to inform that my ministry will be providing an additional 40 million euros in donations for Ukraine in 2023. This support will be used primarily for emergency reconstruction of critical infrastructure, health equipment, and, if needed, emergency resilience in anticipation of the next winter. We will also take concrete steps to encourage our private sector to contribute to this effort. It is much needed. To that end, I'm announcing today the establishment of an insurance mechanism to cover investments in Ukraine against war-related risks via the French Public Investment Bank. This is totally consistent with the multilateral insurance mechanism proposed by the UK and Ukraine, which we support. Last but not least, we fully support courageous reforms President Zelensky has pledged to undertake in order to foster the rule of law and to improve the business climate in the country. These efforts will be key to attract private investment, without which reconstruction will not be possible. Thanks to our joint efforts, Ukraine will build back and build back better. Up until then, our support will not fade. Thank you.
And please now can I invite Zbigniew Rau, Foreign Minister of Poland.
Thank you, James. Prime Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends. For the last couple of weeks, the world has been closely following the actions of the Ukrainian armed forces systematically liberating their homeland. The damage discovered in recaptured territories is staggering. It is staggering, but its barbaric nature, and it is overwhelming by scale. Recent heinous act of blowing up of a dam in Nowa Kachowka drastically adds to the complicity our long-term efforts towards reconstruction. The process of reconstruction itself will mean substantive involvement of the public as well as private sector and business to a large extent. Our task as the governments is to prepare the appropriate institutional and legal framework, political support on the spot, and financial resources. The mobilization of financial resources will be a major long-term challenge. I would like to again strongly reiterate that seized Russian assets should serve as key source in this respect. It is clear that Moscow should be kept legally accountable for the aggression, but it should also pay for the enormous damage done to Ukraine. The success of the reconstruction of Ukraine is in the best interest of Europe and the whole international community. It is in our interest that Ukraine becomes a robust and advanced market economy, playing by the rules with the administration capable to absorb the assistance. This is why Ukraine should become a member of the European Union as soon as possible. As it has been said, today in Brussels, the European Commission is presenting the informal update on the progress made by Kiev since it was given the candidate status. We all know how effective Ukraine has been in meeting the 7 criteria, despite the ongoing war, continuous missile attacks, and the flood caused by the destruction of the dam. Ukraine will be ready to start accession negotiations soon. If this is the case, the EU should also be ready by the end of this year, after the regular autumn enlargement report. The concept of a merit-based process must work both ways. Ladies and gentlemen, Poland has already proven its credibility by providing humanitarian and military aid to Ukraine during the war. We are ready to play a trustworthy and reliable partner also for its post-war reconstruction. We are equipped to play this special role as a transport, logistics, and international hub. Our key assets are the geographical proximity, the longest EU border with Ukraine, well-developed infrastructure of border crossings, long-standing experience, and the competitive business cooperation offer of Polish entrepreneurs on the Ukraine market. Let me mention a few elements which we have already done preparing for this enormous challenge. More than 2,000 Polish companies have approached the Polish Trade and Investment Agency expressing interest in cooperation with Ukrainian partners in the recovery process. We are reassuming the operation of the Polish Trade and Investment Agency office in Kiev in the end of June to give a clear signal to Polish and international companies that the Ukrainian market already provides great opportunities. Credo Bank, owned by the PKO BP, is already providing affordable credit for Ukraine small and medium-sized enterprises. The government has prepared the law enabling the extension of insurance coverage for the transport of goods to and from Ukraine, as well as investment activities. For the last year, the Polish official export credit agency was the only one insuring trade receivables. On this basis, Poland will create a dedicated program of rebuilding Ukraine. The trade insurance to Ukraine will be provided also to foreign companies operating in Poland or willing to invest. I'm convinced that Polish companies, taking into account the meaningful relationships they have already established with Ukrainian partners, are ready to develop them further together with international partners. Thank you.
And now can I invite Harjit Sajjan, Minister for International Development of Canada.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to first take the opportunity to thank the United Kingdom and Ukraine for hosting us today. I also want to acknowledge the bravery and the sacrifice of the Ukrainian soldiers who are fighting on the front lines. Now, it is not a secret that Canada's ties with Ukraine run extremely deep. Canada is home to 1.4 million Ukrainian Canadians, and they have made a significant mark on our national identity and values. It was Ukrainian Canadian Senator Paul Yuzek who first brought forward the vision of multiculturalism in Canada with a pivotal Senate speech. Another Ukrainian Canadian, Lawrence Decor, helped write the section of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms that entrenched multiculturalism in Canada's Constitution. These Ukrainian Canadians saw a Canada that recognized its deep connections to the wider world as an integral part of who we are. And in the spirit of an interconnected world, I join you in this resolute to show of our international solidarity with Ukraine. And just 10 days ago, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was on the ground in Kyiv. And while there, he reinforced Canada's enduring commitment to Ukraine and announced new support measures, including increased military assistance and support for mental health. Canada has committed over $8.8 billion in financial, military, humanitarian development, and immigration assistance for Ukraine. And this includes over $5 billion in direct financial assistance. With over $4.3 billion flowing through the International Monetary Fund's new administered account for Ukraine, which was championed by Canada. This also includes a $500 million stemming from the proceeds of Canada's Ukraine sovereignty bond, the first of its kind globally. Our commitments to Ukraine are especially important in the face of the evolving crisis, like the destruction of the most recent dam. Canada is allocating $10 million for humanitarian partners to support the people impacted by the floods. And I've visited Ukraine many times in my former capacity as Minister of Defense. And just a few months back, I had the opportunity to visit in my current capacity. And that trip allowed me to personally witness what the world has been seeing at a distance over the last 16 months. What I witnessed was absolute resilience. And as we gather here, the people of Ukraine continue to show the world just how strong and resilient they are in the face of unjustifiable and unwarranted Russian aggression. So today, we gather to support not only Ukraine's immediate needs, but its long-term recovery, reconstruction, and economic future. A future that is safer and greener, more open, and more resilient. To help set us on that path, 1 month ago at the G7 summit, Canada made a landmark commitment to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Canada announced $283 million for the High-Impact Partnership on Climate Action to help countries build clean and climate-resilient economies. And today I'm announcing an additional $20 million to the Ukraine grant as part of this initiative. The Ukraine grant will support climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience projects with a focus on technical assistance. Gender equality will also be factored into this work, something that is central for Canada with our Feminist International Assistance Policy. Canada has also been a leader in championing creative, innovative financial tools for Ukraine, and we will continue to look for ways to leverage innovative financial instruments to provide de-risking and concessional support to Ukraine and Canadian investors. Ukraine also continues its work to combat corruption and make progress on these reforms. And these efforts are more important than ever for European Union and OECD accession, and also to encourage more private sector investment. And during my most recent trip, during this trip, I'll be meeting with Canadian business leaders who are looking to support Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction through trade and investment. And in April, Canada and Ukraine concluded negotiations to modernize our bilateral free trade agreement. This will provide a strong legal framework for Canada's firms seeking to participate in Ukraine's reconstruction efforts. I would like to express Canada's support for the launch of the G7+ and the government of Ukraine's Clean Energy Partnership for Ukraine, as well as the launch of the Ukraine Business Compact. Canada also supports a framework on war risk insurance to support private sector input into the reconstruction activities. And Canada firmly believes in the importance of bringing our diplomatic, trade, and development work together. And we need a truly united effort on this front. Because as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said in Kyiv, Ukraine's fight for the future stretches far beyond its borders. Ukraine fights for the future of all of us and for the values that all of us hold so dear. Canada is honored to stand shoulder to shoulder with you as we stand up for Ukraine. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Ladies and gentlemen, could I invite you once again to thank in the traditional way our panellists as they retake their seats and in preparation for our final keynote speech of this session. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this session underlines our collective determination to support Ukraine, not only in its self-defense, but its subsequent rebuild, reform, and recovery. It gives me great pleasure to now introduce to the stage the final speaker of this session, the keynote speaker of this morning, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear James. Dear Presidents, Prime Ministers, Secretaries, Ministers, dear heads of international organizations, dear representatives of international business, dear friends, partners, colleagues, allies, ladies and gentlemen. Today, Ukraine is going through the most difficult times in the history of our independence. It is a crucial time not only for our country, but also for Europe, for the civilized world, for democracy and freedom. The outcome of the war in Ukraine will determine the geopolitical landscape of Europe for many decades come. 16 months into war, no one doubts that Russia has not achieved its goals. Ukraine withstood, thanks to the heroism of the Ukrainian army, thanks to the bravery of Ukrainian people, thanks to the leadership, thanks to the unity, thanks to the pro-Ukrainian coalition and your help. 12 months ago, Ukraine was granted the EU candidate status. We have an ambitious goal to quickly become a member of the European Union. We are already well ahead of schedule of this path. We are transforming our country. We are rapidly adopting European policies and practices, integrating into European markets and strengthening our institutions. European integration is the compass for all reforms and changes, including the implementation of Ukraine's recovery project. I would like to express my gratitude to the European Union for its consistent military, political, financial and humanitarian support. In particular, I want to thank the European Commission and personally Madam President Ursula von der Leyen for the initiative of new Ukraine facility, which will provide medium and long-term support for our economy and recovery. The new Ukraine facility will also support our efforts to rebuild and modernize the country while implementing key reforms on EU accession track. Over the past months, we have laid the basis for winning this war. We believe that we are going to win this war and we will win the peace that follows. I say we many times because this is our common achievements, our common work, our common tasks. We need to accomplish long-term stability, security and prosperity for Ukraine and for the region. We have already begun our long and difficult journey on rebuilding Ukraine. A year ago in Lugano, we held the first major conference on Ukraine's recovery. At that conference, our discussions primarily were around plans, roadmaps, challenges, and prospects. A year later, here in London, our discourse extends beyond plans, encompassing notable achievements as well. We are now addressing the 10 key aspects of Ukraine's recovery, which provide us with a competition of where we are going, and what else we need to do to win this peace. The first aspect of Ukraine's recovery, damage assessment. We have said that the first thing we need to start with is an independent, professional and transparent assessment of damage and reconstruction needs. Together with the World Bank and the European Commission and the UN, we have created such a tool. We have carried out rapid damage and needs assessment. This document provides a comprehensive overview of the impact of the war in 20 different sectors. As of 21st February this year, reconstruction needs have already reached $411 billion. This is an unprecedented figure. Unfortunately, it does not yet encompass many losses, including the damages inflicted by the horrific terrorist attack carried by Russian forces at the Kakhovka hydroelectric power station. We are grateful to the World Bank for actively assisting us and agreeing to promptly conduct an assessment of the damages resulting from this dreadful terrorist act. We appreciate World Bank's support in evaluating all the losses and firmly believe in the necessity of continuing this work. Therefore, the program of large-scale recovery and transformation of Ukraine will also be unprecedented. It will be the largest reconstruction project in Europe since the Second World War. The second aspect of Ukraine's recovery is stages of recovery. The first stage is rapid recovery, which we started last year and are now actively implementing. We are talking about projects that are really necessary for the survival of the country and the people in the face of war. The World Bank estimates that we need $14.1 billion for such priority recovery projects this year. The second stage will be a long-term reconstruction which will take many years, and we are now starting to lay down a plan for its implementation. The third aspect of Ukraine's recovery, priorities for rapid recovery. Last year we also talked about the importance of setting the right priorities for recovery. For this year, our government has identified 5 key priorities. These are energy, humanitarian demining, housing, critical and social infrastructure, and supporting the economy. As I have already said, we need $14.1 billion for the priority tasks in these areas. We have projects in all these areas. Ukrainian ministers will present them in detail with calculations, responsible agencies, and timelines. We expect that at this conference in London, we will finally be able to mobilize the full amount needed for these projects. This is a priority and a very practical story that we have to make together. The first aspect of Ukraine recovery is recovery architecture. The implementation of all these projects requires a special recovery architecture and regular platforms for cooperation. Last year, we created the position of Deputy Prime Minister for Restoration of Ukraine. We have also established the State Agency for Restoration, the dedicated fund for overcoming the consequences of aggression, and the position of Deputy Ministers for Recovery in the relevant departments. We are actively engaging regional authorities, which is an important element of the decentralization reform. Alongside the internal recovery architecture, we have established a new mechanism for a regular interaction with our international partners. This is the multi-agency donor coordination platform for Ukraine. From now, the Deputy Prime Minister for Restoration will be the representative of Ukraine in this platform. The fifth aspect of Ukraine's recovery is transparency. Speaking about the recovery architecture, we have mentioned many times the words transparency and accountability. We are making sure that these are not just words. Ukrainian reconstruction should become synonymous with transparency. Last month, we presented the digital restoration ecosystem for accountable management, or DREAM, as we call it. The ecosystem will allow to control every stage of any recovery project in a very short period of time. More than 5,000 sites for restoration have already been entered into the system. The sixth aspect for Ukraine's recovery is parametric approach and build back better principle. At the Lugano conference, we said that we wanted to carry out recovery using 2 approaches, the parametric approach and the regional approach. The parametric approach is the principle when the government sets the general framework, the broad policies, and the general requirements. What does this mean in practice? For example, we have set new requirements at the legislative level for the construction of residential buildings, in particular that they must now have a bomb shelter. We have also developed requirements for schools and hospitals and are setting up community safety centers. Energy efficiency, green technologies, security, all this should be a mandatory part of the new infrastructure in the reconstruction. The seventh aspect of Ukraine recovery is regional approach. The regional approach is when our international partner countries take patronage of regions and communities in Ukraine and help implement recovery projects here. 30 countries have signed a declaration supporting the initiative to provide coordinating assistance to rebuild Ukrainian communities and regions. During last year, more than 300 territorial communities in Ukraine have signed 1,500 partnership agreements. Nearly 60 countries are helping our cities, towns and villages to recover. Currently, more than 200 projects are being implemented or have been implemented jointly with partner countries or international organizations. The eighth aspect of Ukraine's recovery is sources of financing the recovery. One of the key questions we are constantly facing is who will pay the hundreds of billions for the recovery. First and foremost, Russia must pay for what it has destroyed. We are preparing a fair mechanism that will allow us to confiscate up to $500 billion of Russian assets frozen in the West. In May, a historic decision was taken at a meeting of the Council of Europe to establish a register of damage caused by Russia's aggression against Ukraine. This is the first component of the international compensation mechanism. The second source of funding for reconstruction is the Ukrainian budget, including funds from confiscated Russian assets in Ukraine. The Ukrainian budget for 2023 has already earmarked $3.3 billion, and we have already started reconstruction with these funds. The third source is the assistance from our international partners, including international financial organizations. We are grateful to all of you. Our partners have already pledged $4.3 billion out of the total $14.1 billion needed for the rapid recovery for the next 12 months. But we still need another $6.55 billion. We have set an ambitious goal of securing pledges for this amount as a result of this conference. The ninth aspect of Ukraine's recovery is involvement of the private sector. No large-scale, effective and rapid recovery is possible without the involvement of private capital and private investment. We believe that it is business and entrepreneurs who can make our recovery truly effective. We are already offering projects and investment opportunities to international capital. Together with the World Bank, the US International Development Financial Corporation and other partners, we are working on an effective war risk insurance model for investment in Ukraine. We have identified 5 key segments that will form the basis for the recovery and transformation of our economy. The first sector is energy. There is a huge potential in the electricity sector, gas production and storage, and also hydrogen energy. President of Ukraine emphasized today in his speech on this sector especially. The second sector is a military-industrial complex. Many Ukrainian weapons and developments are proving their effectiveness on the battlefield right now. European and global defense companies are increasingly considering options for building new production facilities in Ukraine. After the war, we expect a great boost in the development of this sector in Ukraine. The third sector is agriculture. Ukraine is already world leader in the production of many crops. With government incentives and private foreign investments, we believe that post-war growth in this sector could be in double digits. The fourth sector is infrastructure. The recorded losses of this sector now exceed over $100 billion. Colossal destruction. So for many years, it will be the market that is worth tens of billions of euros. We will actively offer public-private partnership and concession projects. The fifth sector is IT. We have ambitions to become a digital hub in Europe. We offer IT companies some of the most favorable tax and regulatory conditions in the world. In general, we are telling the private sector that those who invest in Ukraine today will have extraordinary opportunities and prospects in coming years. The 10th aspect of Ukraine recovery, Ukraine is changing. Recovery of Ukraine is not just about rebuilding a power plant, a road, a house, or a hospital. Recovery of Ukraine is also about the transformation of our country, a new quality of institutions, and a new living space, a new European Ukraine. The planned changes and reforms are clearly in line with our aspirations to become a member of the EU. We understand that Ukraine must change, and Ukraine is transforming right now. For this year, our government has identified 10 priority reforms and transformation projects: European integration, security and defense, new veterans policy, human capital development in the face of extraordinary challenges, new economic model, logistic development, and of course, rapid recovery. In addition, we have fully established the anti-corruptional infrastructure, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, the High Anti-Corruption Court, the National Agency on Corruption Prevention. These are important institutions that allow us to ensure the principle of inevitability in punishment and the rule of law. At the same time, our government is carrying out a major digitalization reform, a large-scale deregulation for doing business, the corporatization and the privatization of state-owned enterprises. These are the necessary changes that will allow us to prevent corruption. Dear friends, dear partners, Ukraine is changing and Ukraine is winning. Our victory will be the beginning of a renewed and stronger Europe. We are united in defense and we will be united in recovery. We are grateful to everyone who is helping us fight for our freedom and independence today. I would also like to express my gratitude to the government of the United Kingdom, personally to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Secretary of State James Cleverly, for co-organizing this conference, this perfect conference. Such events enable us to synchronize our efforts and work together towards the victory and recovery of Ukraine. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your tremendous support. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that terrific morning. We've heard courage and we've heard commitment, and we're now going to take a break. We're going to be back here for a hard start at 11:40 so that we can run a session on those immediate needs that we've been discussing. So if you could all be seated again at 11:40, thank you very much.
I remember that day. I remember each day. I remember fear and hatred. I remember them.
You obviously can end up with a slip up on it. Yeah, just use a tight shot. Oh, there you go. Nice. Impeller. I wonder why you're back there. Session before me, basically. Yeah, lovely. I managed. Yeah. So we've got it here. So yeah. Smashing.
The session is about to begin.
That's the trans up here, see. So the cowboy is somewhere further down. Right. I'm not okay. Oh, I might have a PC.
No, I'm sure one. I've only got one of those from there to that.
Yeah. No, I've got 10 metre, 20 metres BNC, so I can you today. Just want to find out if the find the connection is there. That's it, because it's not just fucking BNC type. So that might work. Yes. I'm not sure.
Session, which we're not going, and they're doing that. Yeah, there'll be a reason, but I don't know what it is. No, don't.
Please, take your seats. The session is about to begin. session is
Yeah, it's better to start wider. Like I say, I normally have it so that the players in the bottom third, and then we're okay. So there we go. Sorry, this one keeps fiddling with the mic. Can somebody not tell her to stop fiddling with those mics?
I'm only here for certain people, so that's why my whole family's here.
Excuse me.
Good morning, Ministers, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, decision makers. If we could have you seated now for the next session. We're going to run on quite a tight schedule, so we do need to get started. No. Thank you, everyone. We're ready to start now the next session, talking about the immediate needs for the Ukraine recovery. So I'm delighted to welcome on stage as our keynote speaker for this, the Deputy Prime Minister for Restoration of Ukraine, Oleksandr Kubrakov.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, friends. First of all, I would like to say thank you to UK side for organizing this great event. I hope that we will all see, like as soon as possible, practical results of our conference. If I may just start from presentation, I have a few slides. Yeah. Like our scope since the beginning of this war, it's several key directions. First of all, it was at the beginning of the war, civil logistics, evacuation of our people. It's more than 4 million people were evacuated from Kharkiv, from Kiev, from other larger cities of Ukraine. Second, it's military logistics. It's key, starting from the third day of the war. one of the most, or probably the most important direction in our daily work. Grain from Ukraine and Black Sea Grain Initiative, plus solidarity lanes, all those activities, they're critical because before the war and especially during the war, agricultural sector is #1 export industry for Ukraine, and as far as you know, the salaries to our soldiers we are paying from our taxes, so this industry and to maintaining our agricultural industry, it's like one of the first and the most important tasks. Critical restoration, we will provide more details a little bit later, but again, last year we realized several projects, and it was mostly temporary solutions. After the occupation of territories, we constructed temporary bypasses, temporary bridges, but all those measures they allow us to provide at least basic services to those occupied regions. I'm sorry, it's not working. Yeah. At the same time, we can plan a lot of things. We can plan restoration process. We will discuss a little bit later about how we are planning prioritization. But we are facing with challenges which we cannot predict. First of all, it was attacks on civilian infrastructure. Last year, we faced with blackouts, real blackouts during winter period. And it was like, again, everybody expecting something that it will happen, but like you cannot believe that Russians, they can do this, but they are doing this. And then it was Kakhovka dump dispersion, and you see that like the next challenge will be to provide water supply for 1 million people in Dnipro region, and this, like at this moment, probably one of the key problems. We are not talking about agricultural sector, which in Kherson region and in southern part of Ukraine will historically use water from Kakhovka water reserves. And trade blockade, each time we are inventing something, like again, thanks again to our partners. Black Sea Grain Initiative was established with help of United Nations, with the help of Turkey and our allies, G7 countries. Solidarity lines, it was established in cooperation with the EU. All those measures, they allow us to increase exports through alternative channels, but again, without Black Sea corridors, for us, it will be a huge challenge to export new harvest to our traditional markets, and to provide more confidence for our partners and to decrease risk of global food security. Again, some figures just to provide you what is happening, what we are trying to cover, what's already covered. If you're talking about, like I'm not on purpose, we are not showing like figures money, because again, the key I think element for us it's local authorities. We provided financing from central government, and we did everything as it was possible to do with minimum financing. But you see apartment buildings, I mean, the number is huge, destroyed. It's about 18,000 from the beginning of the war. Significant part of those buildings, they're located on territories which we are now temporarily not under Ukrainian control, but still number is huge. Private houses, and what is good, we recently launched e-recovery program. Again, we are using a very transparent mechanism. It's application DIA, which each Ukrainian citizen has. And we already started providing direct financial support only on minor repairments for our citizens. They are using so-called marked money only for building materials and for construction works. As a first source for this project, we are using arrested money of Sberbank Russia in Ukraine. It's about $500 million US, and again, I hope that we will structure new project with cooperation with World Bank. And thanks again for partners, for European Commission, for European Investment Bank and EBRD. Last year, we were able to restore almost on the level of both level, local level and state roads, almost 100 bridges. It was temporary. Regarding our approach to prioritization, we are working on methodology with World Bank, and I think, again, we're trying to analyze complex of factors. It's financial, economical indicators, and impact on social environment indicators. Again, the most critical right now, we understand that both directions is important. Economical recovery, and again, I'm visiting a lot of regions, and I see, for example, how like the life is continuous, is going in cities on 20 kilometers distance from Donetsk, because the key critical productions in this region is mines, coal mines. They are working, and normal life, I would say normal life, in spite of the shellings, etc., it's continue because there are jobs, there are working supermarkets, kindergartens, and people there living there. And vice versa. We have deoccupied territories, we can repair everything, but in case if we won't have production there, in case if we won't have jobs here, people won't come back there. Data-driven policy, again, I will just mention a few things already mentioned by Prime Minister. Digital restoration ecosystem for accountable management, system DREAM. We will provide more details. Geoinformation system for regional development, the unified state electronic system in the construction sector, e-construction. Actually, we implement all projects with this system on national level for the most complicated construction projects, and feedback from, before that it was the most corrupted, one of the most corrupted institutions in our country, but during the last 2 years we're receiving only positive feedback from our business, from all business associations, and definitely we need to expand this system into the local level, and for this the bill of the law 5655 is critical. And register of damaged and destroyed property. Again, we are using on a daily basis this register, and again, Prime Minister mentioned international register. It will be linked for this register because we're already fulfilling on a daily basis this register of damaged property in cooperation with local authorities. Without this, we are not providing any services for local authorities. We are not providing financing for restoration. DREAM system, again, I think you will have possibility to have more information about it, because on lobbies there are some screens, and we can present it in more details. But again, the idea is just to have in one place all reconstruction management ecosystem that creates a single digital project pipeline and ensure transparent and efficient implementation at the national, regional level. All our partners, all our allies will have access to this system. And again, I'd like to emphasize that screens in the lobby, and if visitors will have opportunity or time just to receive more details or on the website, please do it. Core needs for restoration, again, as we mentioned, it's critical and social infrastructure, transportation, humanitarian and demining, it's critical, but again, we can compare, in some cases, business doing demining much faster than state institutions. I think just we need just to attract experience from all over the world, because challenges which we are facing right now in this sphere probably are one of the most complicated. Energy infrastructure, again, we are trying to be ready for the next heating season, to prepare our grid, to increase production of electricity, and to protect our main grid with reliable solution and shelters. Last year we did it during attacks, and again, it's already been said many times that our people, our workers, they're real heroes, like our soldiers, which protect us on battlefield. how to speed up restoration. Again, like there are several ideas, but what is really important, just to say, first of all, I think we are always. I'm very often asked how we can help you, or what is your priorities, or what is your project. But again, we can plan projects, we can discuss, and I mean, I provide some figures, and we are working with IFIs on daily basis, like trying to package all those schools, houses into new like projects, and step by step we implementing them. But then it's happening, for example, Kakhovka, and on the third day of this strategy, we have to start construction of new pipeline in order to supply water for 1 million people. And it cannot be performed on regular basis. I think we need to discuss during our donor coordination platform some ideas how to react on such challenges, what kind of mechanism we can use in order to be more fast, in order to provide like response on such challenges in much faster way. And the economy, again, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on future, on new industries. At least let's, from our ministry, from our team, like what we are asking, let's discuss together how to react and how we can support our like production, our business on the occupied territories. Because again, interest rates right now in Ukraine, like 30% plus. I mean, it's impossible just for any business case to work to receive like positive results with such a high interest rates. To provide grants, probably again it will be one of the best investments from our joint side. So we will have more time to discuss this. Again, regarding projects, I wouldn't spend a lot of time. Just the key thing that 80% of restoration projects are structured right now via loans. Private sector, from our point of view, like at this moment, the most important thing is just to start, not the scale of the projects, of private-public partnership projects based, but the key for us is just to start such a projects, and we are working together with IFC, with EBRD, and developing, preparing concession projects. For example, one of the key seaport on Black Sea, and what we see that there is interest even right now from 5 major companies, and they are planning to participate at the end of this year in this concession contest. So, again, thank you very much for your time. If it's possible, just please switch video, and we'll continue.
I remember that day. I remember each day. I remember fear and hatred. I remember the Mriya. I remember Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Dnipro, Mariupol, Kakhovka. I remember the words. And that's why I'm here today. I am here, building peace amidst the war. I'm here for you to come back. So you have a home to come back to. I'm here for you to love. I'm here to build kindergartens, new schools, hospitals, building a lot of roads. And I'm building one road, the road to victory.
I'm here. And when I'm asked what I'm doing here in Ukraine, I answer, we built Ukraine. We are all here.
Nous tous sommes là.
Vi alla här. そして皆ここに来ます。
Me olemme kõik siin.
Jesteśmy już wszyscy.
Me olemme kaikki täällä.
Vi är här allesammans. Estamos todos aquí.
Vi sind alle da.
Siamo tutti qui.
Všichni jsme tady.
We build Ukraine.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for such a powerful expression of what needs to be done, but also what we can do. And we have a very distinguished panel here who will talk about the various perspectives on rebuilding. My job really is just to be a very, very tight timekeeper. So if I could say that I will try and be as disciplined as possible, both with my questions and perhaps with the answers as well, so that we can keep to time. And to set an example, I'm going to start with the UK. And if I can turn to our Secretary of State for Transport, Mark Harper, to tell us a bit about what you see the UK's role is in supporting the resilience and recovery of Ukraine's national infrastructure.
Sarah, thank you. Well, politicians are not known for their ability to stick to time, but I will do my absolute best. First of all, let me thank Deputy Prime Minister Kubrikov, who I had the pleasure of meeting at the G7 Transport Ministers meeting in Japan at the weekend, where he set out very clearly the needs of Ukraine and had the full support of the G7 colleagues. And I'd like to extend that welcome as well to Finance Minister Marchenko and all the panel members and the delegates, all of you here today. Thank you for joining us. Everyone here and people right across the world admire the bravery of the Ukrainian people in standing up to the murderous invasion of their country. Everyone here admires the heroism of farmers turned soldiers, housewives turned snipers, and web designers turned drone pilots. And actually we saw a lot of that in the video, actually ordinary people defending their country. And the transformation of an actor, not just into a peacetime president, but a war leader standing up to tyranny. And it's in his government and the Ukrainian people's honour that the UK has convened this meeting today and tomorrow, and we're very proud to do so. But there's another form of bravery in Ukraine, a form of bravery not immediately as clear. When I met with Deputy Prime Minister Kubrikov's colleague in Leipzig last month, Minister Derkach, he didn't only want to talk about how Ukraine is going to defeat Putin, nor just about rebuilding his country after the cowardly attacks of Russia, but he wanted to talk about Ukraine's future, the plans for clean energy, integrated, sustainable and resilient transport, and their plans for 2030 and beyond. The Ukrainian people don't just have the will to fight, they don't just have the certainty that they will win, but they have the courage to plan for a better tomorrow. And while Russia remains mired in the past, with lying generals, a war criminal army and a thieving president, Ukraine looks to a bright future. And we stand with them now, providing arms, ammunition and training, but will continue to stand with them as they build that bright future for the Ukrainian people. The UK government sees measures to rebuild Ukraine as no less important than our diplomatic and military campaigns. Transport, of course, will be a crucial part of this recovery, which is why, following on from the significant financial support package announced earlier by the Prime Minister, I can announce new commitments to ensure Ukraine's transport workers are primed to drive the country's economic recovery once this conflict is over. We will be funding virtual reality training for seafarers within Ukraine, maritime training for Ukrainians here in the UK, and also working to train Ukrainian air traffic controllers so that we can get the civil aviation sector to rebound quickly after the conflict to enable us to rebuild Ukraine's economy. And that builds on previous support, such as the rail aid package which we supplied earlier this year, which I think you saw a bit of in the video, which I had the honour accompanying my own constituency, and men and women that I represent in Parliament are part of the effort enabling the reconstruction of the Ukrainian railway system, which is essential to enable their economy to function. But with the World Bank estimating the reconstruction cost to top $400 billion, we must mobilise wider international support, including the private sector. That's why this conference is vital, to match Ukraine's recovery needs with private sector investment and expertise, to unlock private capital and reassure investors by de-risking projects and showing that Ukraine is open for business, and our announcements about the London Risk Insurance Forum framework are going to be important for that, and to support Ukraine as it reorientates its economy west rather than east, towards an open, democratic Europe rather than a closed, illiberal Russia, towards the new rather than the old. Throughout, Britain will lead by example, as we've done today, convening like-minded partners to join this noble effort. Doing so will be part of the historic work of rebuilding a free Ukraine, one where its citizens can enjoy not only a hard-fought peace, but also a more prosperous future. Thank you all very much indeed for your support. I look forward to coming back here tomorrow to talk about the further work we're doing in the transport sector. But for now, thank you very much indeed for what we're all going to do to support Ukraine in rebuilding its country.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that. And if I can now turn to the Minister of Finance for Ukraine, Sergei Marchenko. And I would welcome you perhaps to talk about what you see as the priorities in rebuilding and modernising, and how you envision the post-war structure of Ukraine's economy.
Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, colleagues, it's a pleasure for me to be here and to join such a discussion on rebuilding and reconstruction of Ukraine. First of all, it's a great opportunity for us to reiterate deep gratitude for all of our partnering countries, which help us to finance our budget needs. At this moment, we fully financed for this year, and we managed to attract only for this year $20 billion US. And if we're talking about starting the war, we managed to attract $51 billion US. I think it's a great success of negotiation. It's a key message of our partnering countries to deliver that we are not alone, and we are not alone not only for budget needs, but we are not alone when we are talking about reconstruction. Also, government of Ukraine continues to hold overall macroeconomic and financial stability. We managed to decrease level of inflation from 26.6 last year to 15.3 this year. We managed to give necessary incentive for our economy to strive and to revitalize, if I may say so. Even our partner in IMF estimation improve our forecast for this year. Our GDP will be at least 3%. We have growth at least 3%. Also, our budget in quite stable situation. We managed to meet our plans. We also managed to meet our pre-war revenues target. If we are talking about reconstruction, the key question we should ask ourselves and discuss, how come we can manage to bring people of Ukraine back? And when we are discussing different projects, different incentives, this should be on our minds. It's a first message. How come we can bring our people back? Because creating favorable conditions in Ukraine help us to survive, help us to bring our future rather sooner than later. Another question we should ask ourselves when we are thinking about different project restoration, repairment, and other kind of reconstruction, how come we can manage to increase and to Ukraine's economic growth? It's a very important question. We want to restore our jobs. We want to restore our business to operate in Ukraine. We want to attract investment. We want to attract investment not only for surveillance, but also for a future. And the last question we should ask ourselves, is this all of projects, all of investment can help us to create better security in place? If it's all of this question, if you have answer yes, you can start investing in Ukraine, because it's something we really needed. To be a little bit sovereign, like a Minister of Finance, traditionally we are very sovereign persons. Nobody likes us, but anyway, we should think about a little bit about existing situation and infrastructure. We did, together with Deputy Prime Minister Kubrakov, very crucial stuff, trying to match our priorities with possible donors' money with our priorities, because it's something very unusual in previous lives, because we traditionally were very welcoming for any money we receiving. Now we are not. If we want to rebuild Ukraine, we want to stick to the priorities which Ukraine needed first, and then to think about opportunities of other countries. We want to have Ukraine, made in Ukraine in place first. Please understand me correctly. We want to have made in Ukraine first, and then to think about expectations of other nations. Because it's our country, we want to have all necessary stuff in place. We want to track all donors' money. We want to channel this money into the direction Ukraine first needed. And this it's not a very easy exercise, and I believe we can together do it in a better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Indeed, we've seen today is about mobilizing resources, and our next speaker is extremely experienced in this. Anna Bayadi, Executive Vice President of the World Bank. The World Bank's been working with partners and has assessed Ukraine's recovery needs over the coming years. What are the most striking things for you?
Well, thank you so very much. And let me just start by saying how pleased I am to be here at this important event. Let me thank the government of Ukraine and also thank the government of the United Kingdom for convening us. And thank you for your question, which I have reflected upon. What are some of the most striking things that we have seen and learned in assessing Ukraine's needs and early recovery? Well, striking is, of course, first and foremost, that we have a brutal war in Europe caused by invasion by one country into another in 2022, and it seems really to me still unbelievable to comprehend that. Secondly, striking is that we have a humanitarian suffering that is enormous. Just to put it in perspective, the World Bank estimates that Ukraine's poverty has gone from about 5% before the war to about 25% now. The other striking fact is, and it was mentioned, that the reconstruction needs of Ukraine after 1 year of war, and of course now we are 1.5 years into war, was estimated by us, the European Commission, UN, and government of Ukraine at $411 billion. That is 2 times GDP of Ukraine in 2021. That's striking. And the final issue, of course, is that the impacts of Russia's war in Ukraine are felt in Ukraine, but also globally in the form of inflation, tighter financial conditions, and great uncertainty. But what is also striking is Ukraine's resilience, and we hear about it. And Of course, what we see it, government and services are ongoing, infrastructure services are restored, budget is well managed and executed, reforms are even being designed and implemented, and the most recent remit law is something the World Bank really supports. And I wanted to just illustrate a few findings from 2 surveys that we have undertaken recently that also shows the resilience. The first one is a monthly Listening to Ukraine survey that looks at the monitoring of delivery of essential social services that are delivered with the support of our peace project in Ukraine. And this is results from April and May. Over 90% of public service workers have experienced no disruption in receiving payment on time, others only with a slight delay. 97% of pensions have been paid without disruption. 92% of school-aged children are enrolled. 2 out of 5 receive fully remote learning, of course much higher in areas where there are hostilities. And most people report that the community health clinics are open even in regions under hostilities. There are also some areas that give us a glimpse into what we need to pay attention to. Around a quarter of those employed before the war are reported to have lost jobs. Many report that they have irregular jobs or are working to lower salaries. And 6 out of 10 surveyed report that their household is receiving a pension. This means that there are a lot of elderly in Ukraine. And we can also expect learning losses because in the areas that are suffering from the hostilities, there are a lot of children online. We also did a survey of firms that looked at 2,000 domestic firms and 80 multinational firms. And again, of course, firms have suffered revenue loss and employment reduction, but 4 out of 5 firms, 80%, have continued to stay open. Only 4% have permanently closed. And this is because firms have adapted product mix, market, ICT, location. The other very encouraging fact is that international companies have remained committed to working in Ukraine. Ukraine and the World Bank have a very long-standing partnership. We adjusted very quickly to support the war context. At this point in time, we have mobilized $30 billion for Ukraine. A lot of this is coming through partners through the World Bank, and about 23 of this has been dispersed. We provide support to all essential social services through the budget and are now also working on critical projects in areas such as health, transport, energy, agriculture, and housing. And what I'd like to maybe just finish with is, what do we see as most essential now? Well, we really need to focus on tangible results. We heard it this morning, and I'm really impressed. The 2023 budget is in much better shape, actually, than the 2022 budget was. This is very good news, and it's really thanks to the good execution of the Ministry of Finance and, of course, international development partners. But we also really need to focus now on the investment projects. They also need funding, they need execution, and they need support. We also need to make sure we stay coordinated among us and, of course, also Ukraine within Ukraine. And we need to make sure we think creatively with the private sector. I was encouraged to hear about war insurance. We need to think about leveraging, and we need to think about guarantees. And we need to stay united as a community for Ukraine and with Ukraine. And for this, I really welcome this conference. And I will finally say that we must always remember that our steadfast support to Ukraine is vital for Ukraine, but it's also an investment in global prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. It is extraordinary to hear of progress even within those conditions. And we turn now to Lars Løkke Rasmussen, the Foreign Minister of Denmark. And if I could ask you, how do you think we engage the private sector and secure a long-term whole-of-society engagement in the support of Ukraine?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. First of all, I would also like to echo a warm thank you to UK for hosting this year's Ukraine Recovery Conference, and I also want to emphasize our strong commitment and support to Ukraine, which cannot lose momentum. And that's perhaps a bridge builder to answering your question, because engaging the private sector and civil society is also about ensuring long-term commitment to Ukraine, because our strongest stronghold, our democracy, is potentially also our weakness. I mean, it's very clear that the strategy in Kremlin these days is to wait and see. whether Western, the allies, the friends to Ukraine will lose our patience. So we need domestically strong support. And by engaging civil society and private sector, we can do more in Ukraine, and we can engage more voters, honestly speaking, which will ensure long-term commitment. So a few reflections about our concrete experiences. First, about how to make an inclusive process in line with what I just said. In Denmark, we have created a Ukraine fund with strong political support in the parliament. Everybody is on board. This year alone, it is around 2 billion euro. Most of it, of course, military support, because that is the most important thing right now. But we can't wait for the last bullet to be fired before we start reconstruction. So we have allocated around 100 million euros to reconstruction efforts. And we have established a sounding board or advisory board or whatever you would like to call it to ensure a whole of society effort. And we have brought a variety of actors to the table to discuss the Danish support to Ukraine. So that's one important thing. And secondly, you could ask how to ensure the essential engagement of the private sector, both short-term and long-term. And we have found, and this is not rocket science, but we have found that companies face two significant challenges in their efforts to engage in Ukraine. And first, of course, a major risk of losses in connection with exports to and investments in Ukraine. And secondly, and I think equally important, a lack of information about projects, market opportunities, and relevant Ukrainian partners. It's not easy, to do business with Ukraine these days. And to help to overcome these challenges, we have launched a loan and guarantee scheme in Denmark's Export and Investment Fund. And with this fund, we have engaged right now more than 150 Danish companies and private funds in concrete projects in Ukraine. It is, of course, still early days, but so far, newly funded private sector projects are supporting more than 1,000 jobs in Ukraine. Short-term credits, loans, and guarantees are important tools to sustain economic activities here and now. And of course, this is just, the very first small steps towards more transformative efforts. We will need massive investments from international financial institutions and support for the Ukrainian banking and insurance sectors. But we are on our way. And then finally, I would say just a few words about the regional approach, which I also think is important to keep the private sector and the civil society on board, because we responded positively and accepted the invitation from President Zelensky last year to take a special responsibility for reconstruction Mykolaiv. And it have led to a situation where it's much more visible. With that approach, it comes with many advantages. It contributes to a broad public ownership, and it allows for direct coordination with national and local authorities in Ukraine. We have had the mayor in Mykolaiv in Denmark on several occasions already. We have had business communities in Mykolaiv. We are planning to establish a representation, a kind of satellite from our embassy in Kiev in Mykolaiv. So this regional approach is also, I think, an important stepping stone to actually do something. So, that could be perhaps 3 takeaways from the Danish experience. And then finally, on a personal note, I must say, and we discussed it here in the panel, I am so impressed about the Ukrainian leadership. I have been minister for like 15 years altogether, prime minister, finance minister. It's a tough job. But bearing in mind that you are fighting a war and you are making, progress and reforms, and we are pushing for transparency and anti-corruption and sound fiscal policy, and and then this huge challenge linked to reconstruction. It is amazing. And I just want to say that on a personal note.
Thank you. Amazing is the right word, and it's a potent point that democracy is proving its worth just now. So we take our place in that, and also the sort of innovative approaches that we can take, and that Denmark is already doing. So we turn now to Werner Hoyer, President of the European Investment Bank. And the question for you is really, how can Ukraine evolve its economic structure to attract investment and pave the way for immediate and sustained growth, drawing on relevant lessons from earlier EU enlargement support?
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to the organizers for having us here in London. It's a privilege and a great opportunity, and I would like to thank the Ukrainian colleagues. And I would like to underline what Lars Løkke Rasmussen has just said. It's amazing what these people in Ukraine are presently doing, their perseverance, their resolve, but this is also true for the leaders. And without them, it wouldn't work. So congratulations on this. What is key, and this is obvious, it is not only weapons which will decide whether this war will be won or not. It will also be the economic resilience, which is presently shown in a remarkable way, all the way from tax collection to continuous production under difficult circumstances. So what we do today to support investment will make Ukraine stronger within the EU tomorrow, and I underline within the EU, because I see this guy over there as my future governor. As the finance minister of Ukraine, he would be the governor of the European Investment Bank nowadays. What we do now will lower the bill tomorrow. The more we wait, the higher the bill for reconstruction will be one day. So that we better get started now and not wait until the ink under a peace treaty is dry. That might take some time. So let's not underestimate the Ukrainians like Vladimir Vladimirovich did, because he thought he could do it easily. That is obviously not the case, and he has made the other miscalculation that he thought the West would fall apart immediately once he has crossed the border. Our institution, the European Investment Bank, stopped our business in Ukraine, in Russia in 2014, because we said he will not stop on Crimea. This will go on, and this was why we were pretty well prepared to do our job there. When we look back over the last decades, no process in Europe has been as powerful as the accession of the countries of the former Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact to the European Union. When I visited as European Affairs Minister in the 90s, the Baltic states, for instance, I would have never dreamed or dreamt that one day they will be so successful within the European Union, and they are, and Ukraine will as well, because some people must get rid of the idea that there is some retarded developing country joining the European Union with huge problems bringing it with themselves. No, this is going to be a strong economy, not just agriculture, but also when it comes to technology. Look at what the Ukrainian people in Western Europe are presently experiencing when they see how far behind the schedule we in Western Europe are when it comes to digitalization and the use of the electronic means, for instance. So let's welcome the Ukraine as a strengthening of the European Union once they're in. I'm convinced the Ukrainian economy can evolve massively by considering reconstruction, accession, and integration together, applying EU standards in everything they're doing, which is the case, but also bearing in mind that this course requires a lot of buy-in. I'm sure that the government can again surprise us very much on align and accelerate on aligning with the EU on rule of law. What we have heard about dream before is a dream. And we already see the fruits of this, and this is extremely encouraging, because this is a reassuring message. This is a confidence-building measure for investment in Ukraine. So through lending and technical assistance, we as EU Bank are working in close partnership with all partners, but of course, particularly with the European Commission. There is, by the way, no room for competition among multilateral development banks. There is so much room for synergies and cooperation. We need to do this together. Today, Today we signed an MOU with the Ministry of Restoration to strengthen our cooperation on reconstruction and recovery. We have a huge pipeline of projects. If we get the guarantees in order to bring this into place, we can do much, much more. And last but not least, we will later sign an important agreement with the European Commission to launch the EU for Business Guarantee Facility to improve access to finance for SMEs in Ukraine and other countries of the European Union's Eastern Partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that reminder that economic resilience as well as weapons, how much that matters, and also the excellent example of the Baltic states in EU accession and how we can look forward beyond that. So we've been talking about the recovery of Ukraine being sort of visibly about infrastructure. Troy Rudd is the CEO of AirCom, best acronym of the day, which is a major global infrastructure consulting firm. And I wonder if you could tell us how you are engaging the private sector to help address Ukraine's immediate recovery needs. And from your experience, how can we make support to Ukraine's early recovery even more targeted and impactful for the long term?
Great. Thank you very much. And first, before I start, I would like to thank the organizers, the government of the UK and the government of the Ukraine, for bringing us together and having this discussion. And as already said, thank you to the leadership of the Ukrainian government for being, frankly, so brave and leading in such an extraordinary, difficult time. As an organization, private organization, we did not start with any presence in the Ukraine prior to the invasion. But we immediately supported the Ukraine by first, and I'll say immediately within days, closing down our business in Russia and exiting the country. And since then, we have many people in Europe that have been individually supporting the Ukraine and the people from the Ukraine, and we as an organization have taken a strong position to continue to do that. Now, with respect to your question about the acceleration of the investment in the recovery or in infrastructure, I really think there's two things from our experience that I would point out. First of all, there's been a discussion about the magnitude of the recovery, and it's always talked about in terms of dollars. But you have to think about the mobilization that's got to take place, the mobilization of people to come from other countries when the recovery gets into full force, and the impact on supply chains, what actually has to be mobilized to make this happen beyond the dollars. There's no question there's the commitment, the financial commitment, and the commitment and the will to do this. But if you think about how do you mobilize in the face of so much that has to happen in such a short period of time, and think about all of the stakeholders that are involved, the stakeholders, the people of Ukraine, the decision makers within the government, the decision makers with other governments that are participating or within banks. The amount of stakeholder engagement is extraordinary. And so I think that what we've learned from our past experience is bringing a programmatic approach to this, where you have the opportunity to lay out the objectives of the stakeholders, baseline what you need to accomplish, and set out clear milestones that obviously adapt over time, but then it gives you the ability to create transparency and accountability against achieving those goals. So that's the first, and I think the most important thing is taking a programmatic approach. And I can say it on behalf of our organization, we think we will help bring that to the table, a programmatic approach, again, to the reconstruction of the country. The second important point is, again, in terms of the mobilization, it's imperative that we have governments and private sector come together, but governments to create a safe and efficient environment so that private sector can move people and goods into the country. And what I mean by that is creating government-to-government relationships that allow for that to happen. So it effectively, things like extending the licenses of engineers from other countries into the Ukraine without having to be relicensed. Extending the opportunity for people to come in and out and across the border, right? Migrating two projects and two programs. And also creating an opportunity so that goods to support the construction or reconstruction can come across the border. And again, this isn't just a central government-to-government relationship. It's a relationship that governs all forms of government, whether it's local or municipal. So that, again, those goods can come into the projects when they need to be efficiently and quickly so that we can expedite the reconstruction of the country. And again, I can't can't tell you how important. And there are great examples that have been done in the past, those country-to-country agreements that really open up the opportunity for really the efficient delivery of the recovery. Thank you.
Very much indeed for that. And it's very good to consider not just what needs to be done, but how. And we're going to turn now to Achim Steiner, who's Administrator, United Nations Development Programme. You've just returned from Ukraine, so you've met people directly affected by the war, as well as key officials, including the Prime Minister. So how can the international community best support the government to ensure an early recovery? And how is the United Nations family having an impact on the ground?
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you also to our co-hosts. Thank you for bringing us together. And indeed, talking about recovery can take many forms. You just alluded to another one. I think we heard a lot about systems and ecosystems that you are building. Deputy Prime Minister, I think the first challenge that you have faced in thinking about recovery in the midst of a crisis is that precisely you have to take a systemic approach, which is not easy given the daily survival challenges that are faced. But let me just say, having spent some days in traveling across Ukraine last week, I met your senior officials, I met mayors, I met the men and women who basically had to flee at a few hours' notice and are now trying to go back to the places they call home, but what they find is shattered homes. I met the brave men and women who are now on the front lines of what has become one of the largest minefields in the world, Ukraine, with unexploded ordnance and having to try and clear, for example, a residential area outside Kiev, Irpin, which I spent a morning at, first of all, of the mines that prevent you from going back, then the rubble that has to be removed, getting both the local administration, the equipment, the expertise to do all of this, and the financing. Recovery, colleagues, I think really is not an abstract concept right now. There were some when we met in Lugano who said, how can you talk about recovery and reconstruction when you're in the middle of a war? If you speak to those tenants that I met, if you meet the small and medium-scale entrepreneurs, the men and women who are actually the backbone of Ukraine's economy right now, and you speak to them and you hear how they lost everything, became internally displaced people, live in another part of the country right now, have to rebuild their businesses, how little money can actually make an absolute difference in starting again. It is these hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of small enterprises that you and your Prime Minister, when I met him, also highlighted as a top priority. Recovery, reconstruction is not only physical, it's the social infrastructure. We already heard this morning about hospitals, about schools. It's also about the many injured that are now in hospitals that have to recover. I spent time in a hospital complex in Lviv and learned about the challenge of just producing enough prosthetics, finding people who can produce them, setting up businesses that can actually provide an input at that moment. But let me briefly say, sir, as you also said, I'm here on behalf of the Secretary General this morning representing him. He could not be here, but he wanted to send a very strong and unequivocal message of commitment on behalf of the United Nations. I'm joined by the resident coordinator of the United Nations country team here, many of our agencies who are working in Ukraine right now, and some of us for decades. UNDP has been a partner in Ukraine for over 20 years. Others were mobilized, for example, through the humanitarian response immediately after those attacks began. Just this year, 5.4 million people have already been supported by the humanitarian response that the United Nations, its NGO partners, are rolling out. Our challenge, however, remains that saving lives is something you have to do as part of also thinking about recovery, but the humanitarian appeal right now is only 25% funded. We do emergency responses, for example, to the Kakhovka Dam. The difficulty of trying to bring immediate support in such a catastrophic event was a challenge, but humanitarian agencies, local NGOs, local authorities joined forces. Many people were struggling to survive the immediate disaster. The question now is, can we quickly help the government also to rebuild and help the people to recover? And thirdly, the UN development system with 24 agencies and over 3,000 staff invested in virtually all oblasts that are currently not occupied by Russia, helping local authorities to plan, to do assessments. Anna spoke about the damage assessments that we do together with the World Bank, the European Union to support the government. the human impact assessment that was just published last week to also draw attention to what is happening to people's livelihoods, the loss of income, the food insecurity that is being faced, the challenge for government to mount the kind of social safety nets. This is the United Nations commitment to working with our colleagues in Ukraine and as a partner with many of those who have you just heard speaking, and on whom we also rely to bring the resources that allow us to be truly a voice for recovery while lives are being saved, livelihoods are being created. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Such an important discussion. We're also, as I said, on a tight time scale, and I know that Mr. Rasmussen, you will have to leave. There's going to be a great rush from the stage at 1, but if you need to leave between speakers, do. And in the meantime, we're going to turn next for a valuable perspective on the Baltic states and the EU response to maintaining economic stability in the region, to Valdis Dombrovskis, who is the Executive Vice President for an Economy, Commissioner for Trade at the European Commission. And I wonder if I can ask you that the Ukraine and the EU have been clear on its future as a member state. What is the EU's view of the private sector's role in recovery, and how will the reform linked to membership status galvanize this?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to speak at the Ukraine Recovery Conference on the future of Ukraine, as it has been stated also by President von der Leyen earlier today. The future of Ukraine is in European Union. And just yesterday, European Commission put forward a Ukraine facility worth 50 billion euros to cover the time period from 2024 to 2027. And this facility has 3 main pillars. One is, of course, public financing, which we are going to provide for Ukraine, both to maintain macrofinancial stability, but also for Ukraine's recovery needs. And there we, of course, hope that this EU's initiative, coming with a sizable medium-term package, will also help other donors to mobilize their support. But another important aspect of this package is how to mobilize private sector to support Ukraine's recovery, and that's actually one of the topics of today's conference, including the question of war insurance, because clearly in current circumstances for businesses to go to Ukraine, to invest, to do different kind of economic activities. The question is about covering the country risk and covering the war insurance, and that's why it's so important that EBRD is now coming with this initiative on pilot scheme concerning war insurance. We are going to sign the agreement to work on this pilot scheme later today to cover the estimated finance needs. So European Union is going to be one of the supporters of this initiative. It's also important for companies to get involved to have export credit guarantee schemes, and we are currently working on the pilot project of export credits to Ukraine. And I also would like to mention several European Investment Bank initiatives, EU for Ukraine initiative to support infrastructure reconstruction, address priority investment needs, also ensure business support. So we'll be supporting, European Commission will be supporting this package financially.